appreciate, Cheryl, you coming on Good Friday. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. It's really nice to get to meet you finally and have a conversation.
Yeah, we've had many conversations before via text and via email and via Clubhouse. And Cheryl, the reason that I wanted to talk with you today is I'm producing a documentary and writing a book about toxic mold. And my story, for those people who are watching and don't know, my home that was once featured on MTV Cribs was contaminated with toxic mold between the walls. We never saw anything. I just kept getting sicker and sicker. And I kept thinking, wow, that was in 2001, 2002, a very long time ago. And nobody was talking about toxic mold back then. In fact, I along with Melinda Ballard, she was the number one, I think the pioneer talking about toxic mold and homes. And I've done so much research over the years about healing myself and my family. And I wanted to write a book about my experience so that I can prevent other people from going through what we've gone through, getting sick and almost dying and losing all of our belongings. We walked out of our home with just the clothes on our backs, and then we got rid of those as well. So from an architect's perspective, Cheryl, I wanted to, could you briefly describe why you're here, why you're involved, and you're speaking out about toxic mold? First, describe your experience.
Yeah, well, like so many others that are talking about this topic, I have a personal story and a personal journey. And mine that I knew of started in 2004. So a little bit after yours. I know now that I was exposed before then, but one of my children was sick in 2004 in a home that we had moved into fairly recently while we were building another home, actually. And she had full-on asthma. She had inhalers at home and in school. She was 10. And then started having migraine headaches. So that we started doing CAT scans. And that's a very scary thing when your child has something going on with their brain. And I, by basically divine intervention, ended up at a CEU program, continuing education program for architects, which we do about 12 hours a year required. And I ended up at one on mold in commercial buildings. And then that's when everything kind of came together. And I realized through that people could have illnesses that they didn't get better when they left the building, that it wasn't just like you're sneezing when you walk in, or that your eyes just started when you walked in a certain building, your eyes started running. Now that can happen, but it doesn't necessarily happen that way. It's way more insidious in that you can just gradually get sicker and sicker and sicker. And because your body's accommodating something that you're spending a lot of time in, or a lot of being exposed to for a long period of time, that you become sick everywhere you go and hypersensitive everywhere you go. So you have the same reactions in other places. And that was a real light bulb moment for me. And then the other piece of that was mold and ductwork. And I didn't know that was a thing. So this was a house, as an architect, I inspected it. It was pretty good. It was older, but it was pretty good. It had never occurred to me that you could have mold in your ductwork. Ductwork was metal. My ductwork was metal. How could you have mold in there? But sure enough, we did. And I did a swab sample. I figured out who to contact that wasn't with commercial, but did residential, and came back very high in aspergillus. And of course, just removing the cover was horrifying. So I have a webinar actually that I tell that story in more detail and show some actual pictures. And I hired the wrong person. So, it happens to the best of us. So I hired a company that was certified, and they were a scam. I recognized.
And how long ago was that?
This was 2004. So wherever we are now, for me, I think it's about 16 years ago when we're recording this. But I recognized it when they were working, that one guy kept trying to keep me talking, and I thought it was weird. And they had cameras and they had all this stuff. And I got the sense that there was something funky going on. We have that instinct sometimes, definitely as moms. I think there's that I'm being scammed or I'm being lied to instinct, or I don't think they're telling me the truth.
Right.
And I was getting that. And so I asked them to remove a cover that they said was done. And I stuck my arm down there and I pulled out a wad of garbage and they were supposedly done. And I told them to get out.
Good for you.
I got it. I got it. You guys can leave now. And then they blew dust, this toxic aspergillus filled dust all over my house. And
Intentionally?
I don't know. They just pulled, they were mad and they just
Yeah.
pulled everything out. And I obviously they weren't careful. They didn't care. I didn't pay them the whole amount, but I did pay them something and I didn't get that back. But yeah. And so then after that, I had a house full of aspergillus dust.
So what did you
For
do?
people to know that in a good situation, you should not get your house should not be contaminated.
So let me ask you, that was one of the first questions. How do you know if your house has mold? How do you test? What do you recommend?
Well, now after
Now
doing
it's
all
different.
that, so I do other different things. So I start with health. Yeah, if you have a health issue, there's so many symptoms, and there's a lot of people who talk about those symptoms. Obviously, I'm not a healthcare practitioner, but there's a lot of people who are that talk about the symptoms, and they're very common symptoms. And so I would put together those symptoms with the potential of water damage. Now, I didn't know we had it. I didn't notice any water damage. Mine was from condensation.
Ah, really?
Condensation in ductwork is very common. And so really anywhere you can have it, anywhere you have plumbing, we all have plumbing. There's plumbing leaks everywhere.
And like you said, how could ductwork have mold? But
yeah,
if you
so
mold is
dirt
pretty
dust.
pernicious. It can grow just about anywhere and
Yeah,
everywhere.
so the food source is dirt and dust. The moisture was coming from humidity and maybe condensation from humid air. I mean, when you run air conditioning, our air conditioning systems are dehumidifiers. They're pulling humidity out of the air. That's how we get the air to be comfortable, because in most places where it's hot and humid, hot and dry, not so much, but in hot and humid climates, the air conditioner is a big part of what they're doing is reducing humidity. And so that moisture in the air can end up, at one point, it's going through the ductwork. And if, actually, I see this a lot in places like Florida where people leave their lanai doors open.
Yeah.
While they're running their air conditioner.
Yeah.
And it's 95%, humidity outside. And that air conditioner is cranking, but it's just bringing in a ton of humid air that whether or not it can manage it, that humid air is going through the duct system.
Yep. And
little dirt and dust, and that's all you need.
You think, wow, fresh air. I want to let fresh air in. But if it's 90 degrees outside, you've got the air conditioning running, you're going to have moisture. Moisture, you might not think can lead to mold, but it can. And as you said, like, we didn't see anything either. But one of my biggest symptoms, like your daughter, is debilitating migraines. Debilitating.
Yeah, no, she was bedridden, basically.
Yep.
A child that's why it was so scary. In retrospect, I raised 4 kids, and in retrospect, they all were affected. My husband was affected. My husband ended up getting very sick about 10 years later, which started with Lyme disease. And which now, so I'm researching Lyme disease, and I'm seeing all these people talking about mold. And then finding out that there's actually a connection, which I believe now is just that it's an immune burden. Mold is a burden on the immune system that you're susceptible to lots of things.
Yep.
When your body is working on the most important thing, and food and water are very important, but the air we breathe is so, so critical. And if you're sleeping, breathing this air that is toxic, it's really toxic. And outside, there is mold outside, but it's not trapped in our homes.
And it's not stachybotrys.
Well, it's not, it's diluted by the atmosphere.
Yeah.
That's a big atmosphere. In our homes, we're recycling the air and we're trying to be very energy efficient. And honestly, it's an epidemic that's an unintended consequence of the sustainability movement. As good as the sustainability movement is, and I have a lot of certifications behind myself in that, and I'm a fan of the environment, but we've gone too fast.
Yeah.
With what we've done, we're trying to create basically a Tesla car, but we're building it the same way we built buildings for 150 years. And it doesn't go together. We can't be that technologically precise to manage this stuff, and it's not able to be tested before we try to do things. And so we
Well,
come up with good, say like, oh, now we want to have less air changes per hour, and we want to do air changes with ERVs and HRVs, which are tools to bring in fresh air because you tightened your building so much. And it's
yes.
building science is not that different than health science, just a different medium that we're testing. It's the building instead of a human body, but the building is as complicated as the human body, I would argue.
Do you think that because of the materials that we're using now, like we didn't hear about this problem? Maybe they did have this problem with mold years ago. We know that mold was written about in the Bible, and specifically mildew. And I think there's another reason for that other than the obvious. But do you think that over the years, that number one, the building techniques have changed? We have lost our craftsmen.
Mm-hmm.
And also the materials that we use have changed. We use cheap materials that are man-made. We don't use even the wood, they're doing fast growth trees so that the trees, the wood itself is more porous. And the whole technique that we're using to build homes, quicker, faster, do it now, is going to cause us to be sicker.
Well, definitely the people, for those of us as consumers, we're really interested in more for less. And I do agree with you on the products and actually that's a bit of a concern, is that people are always like, what product should I use? How can I avoid mold by buying a better product or incorporating better products? And this is where I say our buildings are made of many products, but it's also a system, and it's the system that's failing more than it is the pieces. And there are a lot of toxic products that we should be avoiding, and natural products that like we've been using are a good idea. But I would argue that the reason we didn't have it before as noticeably is because we didn't have air conditioning. So I grew up without air conditioning, slept in your underwear with all the windows open and fans running on the top of the sheets. And
what state did you grow up in?
Illinois. I was in Illinois. So
it gets hot there in the summer.
Got the first window air conditioner that was in the dining room, but we didn't have, people lived without air conditioning. All those plantation homes in the South were built with big porches and big French doors that open up and ceiling fans. And we lived outside. Mm-hmm. You had air moving through. You weren't trapping the air. And now that we're air conditioning is, I think, is the most challenging.
Yeah. I don't like air conditioning. I'm always cold. And I mean, literally, I think after I got sick, and plus we moved to Texas where we have 100 days of 100 degrees. And once you get used to that, 70 degrees is cold. Yeah. I got to get a sweater and socks. My hands and feet are often cold. But I think that, too many people use air conditioning to rely on it too much. I mean, what if the power does go out? That's a whole nother topic. But let me switch a little bit. What do you think how can we prevent moisture and mold from getting into our homes? What is the best way? What are some of the building techniques as an architect that you would recommend?
Well, it's really looking at the whole building as a system. So as opposed to individual elements and figuring out. So I have a webinar, actually a mini course that I do. It's called Moisture Basics. So I talk about this for 90 minutes, basically. All the ways our buildings get wet, and condensation is one that gets ignored. There's bulk water. We all know about that. You got a rain thing, a pipe leaks, pipe bursts, that's bulk water. But condensation and moisture being carried on air currents is overlooked frequently. And then the sources, I mean, people don't realize that we create moisture off of our own bodies. And the more people we have in a space, and cooking creates moisture. And how many houses do you go into that don't have exhaust fans for cooking exhaust? They have a microwave that doesn't go, with a fan that doesn't do anything, doesn't go anywhere. We don't pull that air out. Exhaust fans in bathrooms that go into attics. that go into crawl spaces. I've seen them that try to exhaust air out of soffits, which is the underside of an overhang on a roof. That they don't go there because that's the intake.
Yeah, they're not properly ventilated.
Yeah, so it's ventilating our spaces that are extremely humid or our sources of humidity, like cooking. And that plays a big piece. The drainage around our homes.
Yes.
So many of our homes in particular are built by builders without architects. And there are very strict code requirements around drainage that seems to me 9 times out of 10 aren't being adhered to, and nobody seems to know about them.
Yeah,
that's so we
the
end up
problem.
With reverse drainage, and the water's flowing towards our homes.
That's the problem. And you and I have been talking with a few other folks on Clubhouse. If anybody wants to get in and listen into our phone conversations, we're on Clubhouse Thursdays and Sundays at 3. I don't think we're doing one Sunday, are we?
I don't know. I'm not planning to be on.
I'm not planning. Yeah. And I didn't make it yesterday, but we've got a couple of guys from Australia, and Keely Severson and a few other people pop in. And it's a great opportunity for people to just listen in on a phone conversation like we're having right now, and other people join in and with their expert guidance and suggestions and recommendations. But that's where I really want to take this, is how can you avoid mold, avoid water damage? Let's say you do have, a hurricane, you've got water damage into your house. What are the first steps that you should take?
Stop the water. So wherever the water is coming in, it needs to stop. Turn off the water if it's a pipe leak, block the hole, whatever it is, and then dry. The first 3 things you do are dry, dry, dry. And drying, so people realize this is where things go wrong, actually, is drying is something. To know if something is dry is a measurement. It's not I touched it and it's dry, or it's dry enough. So dry is one of those terms that's relative. Well, how dry is dry?
Yeah.
So what I find is that a lot of people working in the industry that are helping with restoration and after events don't even have moisture meters. And the most important meter they need to have is a penetrating moisture meter that they can measure deep inside the material.
Infrared.
So wood in particular will take on water into the core. And it may seem dry on the surface, but that core needs to dry from the inside out, and it has more time it needs to dry. But unless you measure and know that the inside is still wet, no one knows. So they come back and then they re-drywall and close everything up within a few days, and we're good. And then they become my client in 5 years when they say, yeah, I don't know what's going on, but I just started having reactions, or we have mold growing here or there, or something's going on. And I ask about their history. But we had a water event 5 years ago.
We had, so we lost our home that was on MTV Cribs, got sick. I was in the hospital for a month with pre-emphysema. I went to an alternative to Dr. William Ray at the Environmental Health Center in Dallas that treated me with functional medicine or alternative medicine, because if you take a prescription drug, it's literally going to cover the problem. You basically have to detoxify your body. And my husband and I both had 4 different types of mold in our bloodstream, and I had to get it out. So it was funny because years after this, we bought a new house, got into the new house, the new house that, well, it wasn't new, it was used, it was 20 years old, but the hot water tank was outside of the house, and the hot water heater burst, and the whole first floor had 6 inches of water.
Wow.
I know how to clean this, right, Cheryl? I knew how to do this. Immediately stopped the water. It was New Year's Day, 2012. We had a crew of 12 people there by 7 a.m. and I discovered it at 4 a.m. So I got this under control. We cut out 3 feet of drywall, sheetrock, wherever you are in the world, depends on what you call it. And got it all remedied and painted with no VOC paint and yada, yada, yada. Fast forward 6 months, I was getting migraines again, debilitating, where I had a migraine for 2 weeks straight. I went to Florida, where my neurologist at the time just happened to be New York Times bestselling author Dr. David Perlmutter, who wrote the book Grain Brain. I walked in, told him I've had migraines for 2 weeks. I thought it was allergies. Maybe it's Central Texas. We have a lot of cedars and a lot of other things that could cause allergic reaction. And he said, first thing he said to me is, "Did you have a water leak?" I said, "Yeah, but I fixed it." He goes, "I bet you missed a spot." Sure enough, I did. I had the house tested, and the contractor at the time did not replace the interior floorboard in the walls, and we had moisture and mold growth there. So had to redo it again. But my point in saying that is a question. Cheryl, how do we prevent that from happening? How do we find good quality craftsmen and certified mold testers who know what they're doing to fix our homes?
Yeah, it's a really tough problem, which is why I'm focusing on educating consumers. Because I think that nobody cares unless we care. If
Yeah.
we're the ones who are driving the sale, if we're the ones building the homes, if we're the ones buying homes, then the more of us that know what we want, then the more of us that can be looking around saying, well, I don't actually want that. I want you to do it to code. I want to know that the water has been managed. In this case, just knowing that a moisture meter, a penetrating moisture meter beyond the surface, is essential. I actually don't recommend coatings.
Coating, COAT, not
Yes,
COD.
coatings over after you've had a mold or water event. I don't recommend coatings. Coating the materials that were previously wet. Number one, we don't know if they're dry because nobody's testing.
Well, shouldn't you get rid of them anyway?
Well, if
you can.
So some things can be dried, but some things, yes, they're better to get rid of. The challenge there is, again, we have different professionals involved. Structural materials can't be removed by a remediator. They don't have the insurance to say, oh, I want to remove that wall. I'm going to remove the wood framing. Or even the floor and the ceiling are structural components that shouldn't be removed other than the finishes. Now, and if they say, oh, you need to bring in an architect or a structural engineer, then they're taking work away from themselves. And I don't know
that's the smart thing to do, right? That's the smart.
I mean, well, I am one, so I can do it, but that's what I recommend people do. If people say to me, oh, but it's rotten, it's decaying, it's very moldy, it seems really damaged, but the remediator says we can't remove it, that all we can do is coat it. No,
yeah.
So you say, no, can't do anything.
Yeah, no.
All he can do is coat it. But there's other people that are licensed and have the ability and the knowledge to remove even structural. You can do anything in a building. Yeah. It's just a matter of supporting the building so it doesn't fall down while you remove things that are holding other things up, and then putting the materials back properly. Even floor, I see a lot of people removing subfloors. That's a structural component. And if it gets put in incorrectly, then you can have some problems.
So the number one most important thing to do if you have a water leak is stop the water, dry, and remove if possible. Get someone else in. If your contractor can't remove things, find somebody who can. If they're completely saturated, do you ever recommend any type of topical on wood? Let's just say, okay, it's structural, you can't remove the wood. Is it ever appropriate to clean it with something?
Well, yeah, you can clean it with something. I mean, if it's done very quickly, you shouldn't have mold growth, to be honest. Like in your situation where it was within a few hours.
Yes.
Mold does not grow on wood immediately.
Takes 72 hours.
Well, on wood, solid wood, it takes a while. But I will say this. If you have a lot of mold spores in the air from somewhere else that maybe you haven't identified, and people have mold growing in their toilet tanks, they have them in their mold in their toilet bowls, that's a sign that there's a lot of mold spores somewhere that you haven't identified, because the volume must be so high that these guys are flying around just looking for more wet places to land.
Wow.
And it's not normal.
I never heard of that. Never thought of that. See, you learned something new.
Yeah. So I always wonder, like, okay, so is there something else bigger going on here, that there is so much mold in the air in this interior space that it's showing up immediately? So it's kind of like having a nest somewhere. Have we missed the nest? Is there some place where these guys are coming from that's unusually large, that makes it so that, because they're looking to send their babies out, to find more wet places to land. And if you have one and it's suddenly immediately growing mold, it's like if you have ice on your, you have lemonade on your picnic table, and there's water on your picnic table, you don't immediately have mold growing there.
Right.
So, but wood itself, solid wood, doesn't grow mold right away. That's why we can build outside. But if it's not allowed to dry properly, even in a construction process, if somebody isn't measuring, and contractors should have a penetrating moisture meter also.
Yes.
They don't.
That's I think that is, if you're just starting out and you're trying to figure out where do I start? How do I even find out if there's mold? I think that is one tool that people can ask for. Because if a lot of people haven't heard about this is why I'm speaking out. They have allergies and headaches and joint pains, muscle aches, all the symptoms that can be caused ultimately by toxic mold are limitless, just limitless.
Yeah. Find the water that's accumulated, and you'll find the mold.
Yeah.
But the other thing that can be tested very easily, anybody can do, is just knowing your humidity. So in normal situations in the winter, when we're running heat, for instance, heat is very drying, no matter what kind of heat you have. And so indoors, if we're running heat, we should be below 40%. If somebody feels like they need to run a dehumidifier year round, even when they're in a heating season, then I was like, okay, you totally need to figure out where this water is coming from, because the heat itself is very drying and should be drying out the home. But if there's another source, and it can be site grading, it can be the site itself, that a lot of people have slab foundations, but crawl space would be the same, even basements, that if there's water sitting next to the foundation, whether it's concrete block or concrete, those are most common, are a giant sponge. And that water is going to try to dry to the inside, raise the overall humidity, and then it just goes from there as a system. That's where we start to have condensation. Oh my gosh, my windows have condensation on them. Why is that? Well, the humidity is too high. It can also be that the system, the HVAC system, the heating, ventilation, air conditioning system isn't working properly, or that you have air leaks. So if you got all that humid air coming in, just like I said, opening the lanai doors, if there's something else open that you don't realize, I have people putting in ERVs, energy recovery ventilators, in hot, humid climates, and they get worse mold because they don't realize that at certain times of the year, you actually don't want to bring in outside air.
Yeah, that's true.
But the systems aren't designed to handle that. So it goes back to systems. But there's a lot of different places that we don't think of. But it's very easy for individuals to measure their humidity. I have some like little humidity monitors behind me that I use. And I have some other tools on my website, avoidingmold.com, that I share with people that I don't sell them. Somebody's making a lot of money off of them, but that are very simple tools that can help as a clue, but these are clues. So we have to become detectives, where we start paying attention and learning, just like we have to learn about our bodies for our bodies to heal. We have to learn about our homes too, and maintain them, and look around and say, well, that's kind of weird. The downspout's dumping right next to my foundation. I wonder if that's okay.
But a lot of people they might see things, but they don't say anything. I was at a friend's, and their air conditioning unit, just a week ago, their air conditioning unit they had so much condensation. There was a pool of water around it. And the air conditioning unit is next to the house. And I could tell that water was going back into the house. And I said something. And I think the older I get, the more I'm willing to put myself out there and take a risk that, somebody might not want to hear what I have to say, but you know what? I'm trying to save your life here. I'm trying to help you avoid what I went through.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I have that all the time because obviously what I do, people know that I'm an architect and I'm specializing in this. I even have people in my own family that don't, Dad, I think this is a problem. No, it's not. Okay.
Yeah.
I tried.
Yeah. So
so
Cheryl, tell everybody, because it is Good Friday. I want to let you go and enjoy time with your family and celebrating this holy weekend. Tell everybody how they can find out about your online programs.
So you can find me at avoidingmold.com or CherylCiecko.com. They end up getting connected. I do have online courses, recorded webinars. I have free blog posts. I'm also on YouTube at Cheryl Ciecko Architect. Like and subscribe. And I post a lot of new things there. It's definitely me off the cuff a lot. So, but I am sharing things that I see that are wrong, sometimes things that are right, things that to try to create awareness and share education that really everybody can start to be aware of. And once we open our minds to some of the stuff, you look around, you're like, whoa, I see it everywhere.
Yes.
And little by little, just trying to create awareness. So avoidingmold.com or CherylCiecko.com. YouTube, I have a public Facebook page at Cheryl Ciecko Architect.
And it's Ciecko, C-I-E.
C-I-E-C-K-O.
C-K-O. Okay.
Yes, I don't have a stage name. I've been trying to think of one, but if anyone has a good idea, I could adopt it.
No, it's okay. It's
but
all
that's
right.
why I have the Avoiding Mold website, is because that's hopefully easier to remember. Maybe if you try Cheryl Architect, I might come up. There's not a lot of architects that are online, certainly not named Cheryl. So.
Well, Cheryl, thank you so much for spending your Good Friday with us and for educating everybody. I encourage everyone to go to Cheryl's website, and it is avoidingmold.com. I also have a free mold checklist that you can get at my website, ShemaneNugent.rocks. It's ROCKS and /mold. And it's just a couple of tips and tricks that you could use to determine, hey, is this something I should be worried about? But for all the detailed information, go see Cheryl, go to her website, and then join us on Clubhouse. We're on Clubhouse Thursdays at 3 and 3 Central, and Sundays at 3, but probably not this Sunday, I don't think.
How do people find that on Clubhouse? I'm just starting to learn about Clubhouse.
The weird thing about Clubhouse is that you have to be invited. I don't know why. So if you know somebody, like some people who follow you and you're on Clubhouse, I think you can invite, the more people you invite, the more points or something you get, and they'll allow you to keep inviting more people. So
maybe I need to advertise that on my
check it out. But it's interesting though, because I often get notices that some of the people in my my phone book, so to speak, my contacts list, there it is. Some people in my contacts list will join Clubhouse and I'll get a notification, hey, so-and-so just joined Clubhouse, welcome them in. So you might know some people that are in Clubhouse already, but we're on Keely's, I'm going to pull it up right now. Do you know off the top of your head what it's called?
She's called them exposing mold.
Exposing mold. So if you look,
there's a lot of these names with mold growing around. So whether it's surviving, thriving with mold, exposing mold, I'm avoiding. So my goal is to help people not have it in the first place. So
yeah, and my thing, I mean, it's not like, we were talking about this earlier. It's not like when I was a little girl, I always wanted to talk about mold. I wanted to, it was not on my bucket list of things to do when I got older, but I think God has a way of pointing us in a direction that we can utilize some of our skills. And maybe I have this platform for a reason, to help educate people. I get messages all the time from people who are in dire straits and a lot of problems out there. And that's why I'm writing a book about it and also producing a documentary about it, just to kind of let people know wow, some of my symptoms may be because of the air I breathe in my home. And what can
Yeah,
be done about it?
right. And things you don't think of could
Things you don't think of.
be memory stuff, sleep,
Sleep,
depression, mood swings,
restless leg,
rashes, bloody
rashes.
noses, headaches,
Yep,
fatigue. I mean, this is stuff we hear about all the time.
all the time. Yeah. So wouldn't it be better to just clean the air in your home rather than taking a pill? Just saying.
Yeah.
All
Get to the
right,
cause.
Cheryl. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure.
Okay. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.